Chamber Collaborative of Greater Portsmouth, and we also have Ben Van Camp, our VP of What's Next, and Jen Stevens, our communications guru from the staff on the call. And we welcome all of you. I understand that City Manager Karen Conard might be with us, and I'm not sure who else yet, but all of you are important to us, and I thank you for being here. A little bit of housekeeping while you'll all be on mute. Please use the chat function to ask questions. Many of you have been on these Zoom calls before. As you know, we have our speakers and then we open it up for Q&A, which Ben then moderates. As you know, if we get hijacked, then we'll close the meeting immediately, and all Chamber Chat Live events are recorded and will be posted to our Facebook and YouTube channel. And they're up on our website. You can see all the past ones. So even if you have to miss one of our Chamber Chat Lives, you can always get the information from those whom we've had the pleasure of speaking with. So just a little Chamber news. If you're not already following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, you're missing a lot of good information. So please find us, Portsmouth Collaborative and Go Portsmouth NH are our two social medias, websites, all of that. So please tune in. You know that the Citizens Response Task Force has been working since, I think, April. And just to give you a quick update, the Public Realm Subcommittee is switching gears to look ahead to the fall and winter. We're discussing ideas to keep the Portsmouth vibe through the end of the year and into Q1 of 2021. We're going to need help brainstorming and then execution for some of these events we're cooking up. So please reach out to me if you have any ideas, any energy, anything you want to contribute. I'd love to hear about them. Visit popupnh.org. Also has on the Bridge Street lot, has been very successful. They've been selling out their events, which is great, and yet it's still all safely distanced. If you've gone by, you've seen that. They expect to add a retail component very soon. Hip Hop Kingdom is on the stage tonight from 8 to 10, and Sunday you can listen to King, hopefully it's Coyote, I think is what it is, and Troy Ramey from 7 to 10. Food and drink is always available from our local restaurants and breweries, and they are going to be adding a retail component. The Health Subcommittee has been working to identify the best air filtration options for our businesses, particularly the restaurants that once the weather turns, they're going to have to move inside. So they've also been the subcommittee has been championing the mask mandate ordinance that the City Council has been discussing. The third reading is Monday night. The subcommittee's support is based on science and data, which have proven that wearing masks reduces the spread of COVID. So if you also want to weigh in, please connect with the council. You can send an email to the council by going to the cityofportsmouth.com website, and you can send an email to them about your feelings about the mask mandate as well. Please remember to upload your open positions to our jobs board on portsmouthcollaborative.org. We're still looking for folks to join the second Connect and Collaborate. The first one was so successful that we started a new one. And if you're interested in learning more, please contact Ben at portsmouthcollaborative.org. We're going to open up for questions once both of our guests have spoken. So please enter your questions through the chat function. Ben will moderate. Very excited to have both Steve Zadravec and Sean Clancy back with us. We hosted them back on April 24th when they were considering shutting down schools, and now we're talking with them again about considering opening schools. And obviously they've had a few stressful weeks in making some of those decisions. We talked earlier about the need for crystal balls, right? So Steve is going to speak with us first. Steve Zadravec is the superintendent of Portsmouth Schools. This is his 5th year as superintendent, and he was this assistant superintendent for 10 years before that. He has 2 daughters who have gone through the schools, now at Portsmouth High School, and live in Portsmouth with them and his wife, who's a teacher in Exeter. So he knows everything there is from every angle about school systems. So let's have Steve start us out here. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thanks, Valerie. It certainly has been a whirlwind. Certainly last time we were here talking with you about schools, we were all trying to get to the finish line, right? We had been hit with this pandemic, and we were doing what we could to quickly move into a remote learning phase, and then try to get through the rest of the school year. And that we did. And we did actually with a good relative amount of success in terms of operationally being able to pull that off. But I will say, you know, there was such a big sigh of relief when we got to June that, okay, we made it. You know, I guess there was a little bit of denial at first, and then it gradually grew into greater awareness that we got to go back again and try to make sure we're delivering the best possible education for kids in the middle of an ongoing pandemic, knowing that we still have to adapt a lot of the things we do. So we're excited. We start this week. We had our new teachers in on Wednesday, a great new cohort of staff with us, and then we welcomed all of our staff back yesterday. You know, it's kind of, we're learning how to tell a smile, you know, when there's a mask in front of you, you know, so we look at the eyes more, and by the judge of the eyes around the schools, there seemed to be a lot of good collegial interaction, and people were happy to be back together, and hopefully rested to take on what is going to be, again, a considerable challenge this year. To again create school in the middle of a pandemic in the safest way possible for students and staff. And so I think last time if it was April, we may have been forecasting that we were going to put together a task force, which we did in May. We had a task force work from May to early July to develop an overarching plan, not a decision of how we would start school, but just a plan. It included 4 phases to consider based on where we were, what conditions we might open school in. And in the summer, we were looking at that and essentially toggling between phase 2 and phase 3. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what those mean. But I would also point out, obviously, you know, I'm sure many of the people on the call here today are connected to other school systems. And so you all know this is something that all of us are going through right now. Just last night, you might be aware, Northampton had to shift their gears quickly, and now they're going to be fully remote when they were planning to be more in person. And I think it just underscores the complexity of the planning, honestly, that is involved with trying to open up all of our schools and keep so many balls in the air, from student schedules to staff needs to different elements of space and personnel. And so we, for the first part of August, we're hopeful we would enter into what we called phase 3 of our plan, which invited most students back and allowed some to choose a remote option. As we quickly got results back on a survey for which option parents would be choosing, we were quickly coming to the realization that our logistics were going to prevent us from opening up fully in phase 3. Which again meant essentially that, you know, maybe 70% or so of the kids were in school, 30% were choosing a remote option. We were able to staff both with different elements of our personnel, and all of those things did not line up as we had hoped. And so we, for that reason, as well as the reason that I've heard it mentioned, you know, this is in some ways a big experiment reopening schools. We are looking at some models, you know, some parts of the country have reopened already, some other countries in the world have reopened and things like that. But it's still fairly unprecedented to open up schools, invite this many people back into a building. As you know, we have limited capacity in our buildings downtown, and here we're going to open up schools and invite 500 kids into the high school on a day. And that definitely presents a lot of logistical challenges for us. So that, again, with some of the restrictions we had, I don't want to bore you with too many of the fine-tuned details, but one of the big things around space was looking at which guidelines we could safely follow with students and spacing. And the state had put out some guidelines that essentially roughly followed the CDC guidelines, but differed in an important way. CDC, as you know, recommends 6 feet of social distancing. And that's what essentially I think we're all trying to adhere to. But the state, and citing some other research from the American Academy of Pediatrics, had cited some research that said 3 feet would be sufficient if students had masks and other precautions. So our phase 3 still calls for us to be able to follow that lesser social distancing guideline, and we could fit more students in, certainly in that phase. But we became less comfortable as August started to roll on that that was the phase we should open in. We decided to crack the door rather than swing the door open. And so we started to reform some of the ideas around how we would look at those phases. So we went back to phase 2. And phase 2 was having students essentially work remotely while teachers teach. So the instruction looks a lot like it did last spring, although a big caveat to that is we learned a lot of what worked and what didn't work last spring. And so we've been doing a lot of work with teachers over standardizing some best practices of remote instruction. But essentially phase 2 leveraged remote instruction for all students and then built in some in-person supports for students who we know struggle the greatest with remote learning or have the greatest difficulty accessing remote learning. So we had always planned on prioritizing certain populations for small cohort support in the schools while that remote learning is going on. Those students may be coming from places where there is no connectivity. Those students may need access to free and reduced lunch. Those students may have special education accommodations that are best delivered in person. And those students may just be of students who really could not handle remote learning last spring. At the end of the year, each school made lists of kids where they felt it really was not a successful mode of learning for them. So essentially, phase 2 has always been to invite a cohort of students in so we can support students we worry the most about in terms of the remote environment. So we looked at phase 2 and then decided to modify it, honestly, because we didn't want to go from having kids in school 5 days to nobody, many of our students not being in school at all. So rather than phase 2 as it was with no in-school days for a majority of our students, we decided to create a Monday-Tuesday split where half of our students would come in on Monday and half on Tuesday. So we essentially did that by alphabet for last name in most places. And so we'll have students with last names A through K come in Monday and L through Z on Tuesday. And essentially that allows us to cut our numbers in half, which does basically allow us to come closer to our goal of 6 feet social distancing. But it still allows us on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to get instruction pushed out to all students remotely and then give in-school supports for students we fear struggle the most. So it does add in an in-person day into the plan. And not only is that helpful for all students to touch base with their teachers once a week and make sure they're calibrated for remote learning and set up for success, but it also allows teachers to do things that are real hard to do in a remote environment. So in science, on that day of in-school time, you could be doing a science lab, which is a difficult thing to pull off the same way in a remote environment. So, we're trying to adapt, continually adapt as we go. I think our adaptation is really probably the biggest theme of all of this. The hardest thing is it's hard to give long-term answers for things that change so quickly in the short term. But we are starting in this phase and we are looking for opportunities to be flexible and increase the number of students actually in school as we go on those Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, so that we could be responsive to a student who maybe is struggling for 2 weeks and how do we help get them support in school, or maybe finding ways to get more and more social interaction between students. The good news where we are right now is we're not in the middle of a stay-at-home order. And so we do have opportunity for small cohort groups of students to do activities. And so one of the things we saw last spring was a real isolation effect to a lot of students. And we really were concerned about their social emotional well-being. And while of course we still worry about that, we see more opportunity in this plan to get students together for just that purpose, connecting with each other. We intend to run clubs. We intend to run club sports and get kids active, all within our safety precautions. So that's kind of where we are right now in our opening as a broad term. I would say, and this might be of importance to your audience, we know childcare is a critical piece of all of this. We know it's a workforce issue. And so we are trying to work with our community partners to make sure we can provide opportunities for that for families who need it. So a few things we'll send out in our newsletter today are some partnerships we've been able to strengthen and find programs. So one is Seacoast Community School, who's been a partner with us for a while. They're going to expand and offer a morning program at the campus because our kindergarten and half day, I should have mentioned, are in-person half day programs. So the afternoon session of kindergarten, for example, there'll be a childcare option for the morning for working parents. And we'll continue to run our after school programs. And then Seacoast YMCA at Camp Gundalow is creating a program that we're going to provide transportation to, which would also be a benefit to families. That's a program that's actually going to offer some remote learning support for parents. So parents who maybe aren't in school Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that might be an option for them at Camp Gundalow. And lastly, we're very fortunate to have a great relationship with the city. The city has been very gracious in allowing us to use the senior center until it can be occupied by seniors. And so we are planning to host our own sort of remote learning support over there for a good number of students, again, where home may not be an option for them to access remote learning. We can't likely satisfy all of the need, but we're trying to best we can get those kinds of things in place for parents who need it. So I guess I'd pause there and see what other things we could talk about later.
That's an incredible amount of work and ideas and being flexible and shifting on the go. And I give you a lot, all of those who are in that position in trying to make these decisions. I give you a lot of credit. That's hard stuff. It really is. A quick question for you, Steve. What's the story with masks, hand sanitizers, all of that?
Yeah, so we, of course, a big part of our planning is all of our facility work. I should have mentioned, you mentioned HVAC before. We're fortunate, again, being in a great position with the city has helped us fund a lot of renovation projects over the last 10 years. Our HVAC systems are relatively new. We're upgrading our filters to be compliant with the MERV 13 and other standards that are recommended in this environment. We have all of the sanitizer right now we need. We're outfitting every classroom with its own sort of go kit in terms of some of the necessary things, wipes, sanitizer, et cetera. We have a school board policy that requires students and staff to wear masks when inside. And that will be something we will certainly be continuing to ingrain as our new normal in the school. And we are, though, at the same time, scheduling intentional breaks, outdoor breaks. If we can get outside and get kids more than 6 feet apart, we'll give them that mask break, but also utilize our outdoor space for learning too, because that allows us not only to be in an outdoor space, which is recognized to be a little safer, but we'll give them a chance to take a break from the mask too.
Great, thank you. And I know that we have, I know that Ben is watching for questions, and we will do a full Q&A after Sean speaks. So I'm going to, unless there's something else that you want to say now, Steve, we'll move on to Sean, and then we'll open up Q&A in a few minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. So Sean Clancy. Sean Clancy is the Associate Vice President for Marketing and Business Engagement at Great Bay Community College. He has served in various capacities since 2016 after a 30-year career in business. His background includes positions in sales, marketing, and operations, as well as in organizational and leadership development. He's also taught at the post-secondary level. And I can say that he has done some facilitator work for us, for the Chamber, and he does an amazing job at that as well. So welcome, Sean. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Mel. It's great to be back, and I'm just having the deja vu to following Steve last time and hearing all the parallels of equipping our classrooms with PPE and all the layers of protection that we've been implementing on campus. But just to put it in perspective, if we go back to April, back in April, we had about a dozen of us that would come to campus every day. And now we're probably up to 30 staff, and we started to make the decision if having some staff on campus allowed us to better serve our students, then we wanted to bring them back if we could do that safely with all the precautions. So that's been an ongoing issue of bringing staff back. The big test comes on Monday, the 31st. We're going to be inviting students and faculty back. So the building we'll probably be able to flex to a couple of hundred people on campus on any given day, with Wednesday being the big day. But just to say, we made the decision back in May to stay as remote as possible in terms of delivering our education here at Great Bay. And we were basically remote all summer. We were able to finish our students from the spring, as Steve talked about, by bringing folks back to labs very judiciously. And now in the fall, we are opening up with some hands-on learning classes where you have to be in a lab and learning to move your education forward. So you could probably guess what they are, but there are welding lab, our science labs, biotech, vet tech, surge tech, nursing, medical assistant, all of these things where we've done everything we can online and remotely and through Zoom, but now we need to get folks back in the lab. So that's been our big focus, is how do we do that safely? And if we have a few hundred people, let's say up to 200 on campus, we probably have several hundred going back to class on Monday remotely. So that's really been a decision we made months ago, and we've had I'll say the luxury of being able to plan since then. We haven't had to reverse course on very much, so that's been helpful. The other thing I'll talk about is just how we are reminding folks of what we have to offer here at Great Bay. We took a couple of initiatives to make sure that folks, that any student doesn't have their educational journey interrupted. So we have put up $100,000 worth of scholarships that Great Bay it's in reserves, and we're going to make that available to students. And that comes on top of the CARES Act money that was provided to our students, and also the governor's tuition assistance through the Gopher funding. And the last thing we did is we implemented a 50-mile radius rule that says if you're within 50 miles of either of our campuses in Portsmouth and Rochester, but you happen to be out of state, you'll pay the in-state tuition. So really, we're doing everything we can to lower as many barriers as possible to people being able to start, restart, or continue their education, because that's really, as you all know, that's what we're about. So let me just make sure I don't miss anything here, but I did want to just talk about the layers of protection. So the big piece here with our main campus in Portsmouth, and also in Rochester, we are bringing students back to both campuses, is really about controlling our flow. So we're going to have classes 5 days a week. We have tried to segregate. Let's say we have the science wing, we have the third floor where the medical labs are, and we have another part of the campus where we're not having folks cross each other in the hallways. That's one layer of protection, is our flow plan. We are also screening folks as they come into campus, either self-screening the temperature, or in the case of students, we are going to take student temperatures before they enter the building or as they enter the building. We are requiring masks whenever on campus, and we've been putting plexiglass barriers up wherever we can. So just want to make a point that, similar to back in April, 100% of our student services are being delivered remotely. So the next layer of protection is we're not making it possible for people to gather, whether it's staff or faculty or students. I like to say, as students, they come, they learn, and they leave. That is the model that we are in terms of the hands-on training and hands-on education that we're providing for this fall semester. But I did want to say, so that's kind of what's different, and not a lot different, except we're going to be introducing more people to campus for the fall from the last time I spoke. But I did want to talk about the other things that we do, and it really is around workforce development. We have our business and training center here, which we're known for. It's a robust part of our college, and it really helps us fulfill our mission of supporting our businesses and our communities. And I wanted to say that as businesses get back to work and get back to either full speed or whatever they can, we are doing work for companies like Teledyne, a company called EnviroVantage you may have heard of. They're putting together a full-blown apprenticeship. And we're doing a lot of apprenticeships. Another one is US Foods, and another one is Vigon up in Rochester. So the benefit of these apprenticeships is there's some federal Department of Labor dollars that can go towards recruiting and training kind of frontline employees. And that's, we come in and we deliver the related instruction piece of that. So I really feel like we've always been in a good spot to support workforce development. But I think certainly with some of the federal funding that has come in and the focus on rebuilding our economy, all of our community colleges are really well suited to step right into that and provide those training components in addition to the college degrees that we provide that get people back to work, that help employers get back up to speed in terms of their business and growing it. So I'll just catch my breath there, but that was just one thing I wanted to pivot towards. I do have one thing I'd like to promote, which is a new course we're offering called Data Visualization. So here we go. I've learned a lot. Data Visualization Micro-Credential. What does that mean? That means that you can learn about how to handle and manipulate and use data. And as we know, it's not just about IT companies, right? We all have to deal with data. And we've got a strong instructor who's going to be teaching the course. Let me just check my notes. There are 3 48-hour courses. So it's 144 hours worth of training. And it is data visualization, and it's really meant to be something that is a foundational skill that I think more and more people are going to need, whether they work, in data analytics or not. And that will be starting on September 8th. So there's my one plug, guilty as charged. But I wanted to make sure this group knew about it, and so now you do.
So I was just typing that into my notes here. Data visualization. I'm trying to think about whether or not that is. Are we talking databases? Are we talking Excel? Are we talking programming? Can you give us just one little more hint on what that is?
Well, let me read about it, Val, because I haven't taken it. But yes, basically it's talking about the ability to use Excel, and so I guess the software is called Tableau Desktop, and there's 3 different levels of it, but it really allows you to just manipulate data, right? Like maybe the old days it was an Excel spreadsheet and you had to know all the shortcuts and the sorting, where I think Tableau is a little more intuitive, allows you to sort and utilize data and just look at it differently, but you don't have to be this, Excel guru. So not a great example, but.
No, that's good. I think it gives us some insight into what it is. It sounds like something that's necessary. What a great idea. It's a great idea. So thank you.
We did have a question come through for, I guess, both Sean and Steve. What sort of plans do you have in place should staff members or students start to test positive, and when you start pulling the plug on in-person stuff?
So Steve, I'll jump in if you don't mind. I'll go. So a couple of things here. One is with our screening, really we're asking staff and faculty to not come to campus if they have any of the symptoms, the CDC guidelines, and or have, let's say, been exposed or possibly exposed, right? And in terms of students, if their temperature is too high, we're going to ask them to not come to campus. We also have a lot of guidelines from the community college system, which are driven from the state of New Hampshire in terms of contact tracing. And we do have folks here on campus that have been trained to very quickly understand if there's a positive case and then work through the contact tracing process. And obviously that's something that we all need to be aware of. I've got to find some wood to knock on, but we have not had a case on campus since we met last, or really since the whole thing started. But we're pretty sure that when we bring these numbers way up, that our risk goes up.
Yeah, and Ben, I would say similarly, we also have a screening sort of tool that all staff as well as parents would fill out daily for those same symptoms. And, you know, one of the things we expect, honestly, is a higher degree of absenteeism this year, both from students and staff, because to Sean's point, we're going to ask people to stay home for things that they otherwise might not have stayed home for before. So we know we have to adapt that. We're actually trying to bulk up our pool of substitutes right now. And then we have protocols in place. Our nurses have met as a department and followed the state guidelines, Department of Health and Human Services, et cetera, so that if a child does have symptoms in school and we do have to require a test, any positive result from a student or staff member would trigger the same contact tracing in partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. And they would go through that process. I believe their standard for contact tracing is to essentially any person who had been more than 10 minutes in close physical contact with the person who tested positive. So that might be a class of students, that might be a team. I mean, that could be of a few different groups, but we would essentially be likely asking those groups to quarantine. And then in the case where that one case could become a cluster of cases or could indeed become an outbreak, that's where we would be ticking up our response to either quarantining larger groups. In the case of an outbreak, it could be quarantining a whole school. And again, trying to, our tact would be to manage any spread of the virus, and all of our personal protective equipment and all of our protocols are in place so that we don't transmit or risk transmitting the virus as much. But essentially a combination of quarantining, response from us, and closures. We, of course, will be transparent, open with parents too, in terms of if there is a positive case. While we can, of course, identify anybody, we would certainly want parents to know if they're in a particular school, if we did have a positive case.
Thank you. Ben, do we have another
A couple
question?
more questions coming through here, some of which I'm not sure people will want to answer, but we'll give it a go. Is there, Allison asks, what is considered an outbreak in terms of numbers? Is there a threshold for that?
Yeah, so the way I understand it from the DHHS, and Sean may have a better idea, but if what we find is we can contain the transmission to one group of students, one cohort of kids, so in an elementary school, maybe there's a particular third grade classroom that has a case and we know that there was transmission within that group, you could consider that a cluster. But if we find that the transmission actually goes from one classroom to another or one cohort of students to another, that's when you start to pass the threshold of what you would consider an outbreak. And so that's where we would likely be taking more drastic measures in terms of quarantining a whole school.
Sean, anything to add there?
I do not. Steve nailed it.
And then another question came along. What will be the method of notifying parents of any possible exposures?
Yeah, so for us, first of all, we would, if in the case of a positive case, we would notify that school of that. And then in terms of the contact tracing, our message to parents is if your child meets that threshold of contact tracing by the Department of Health and Human Services, they would be contacted. So in a sense, it would be a message of we had a case at the high school, but unless you hear from the Department of Health and Human Services, you can assume your child was not one of the close contacts.
Fair enough. And then another question came in here. Will the schools be directing individuals, parents, students, etc., to testing should there be potential exposure, or will that be handled through their primary care physician?
Yeah, we don't have the testing in the schools itself, but we are trying to partner and try to figure out what other resources are out there. And Sean may have better connections with this, but our nurses are trying to make connections with area providers so we can at least point parents in the direction when that time comes.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I think our recommendation is that people do get tested if there's any type of exposure. We don't have a mechanism in place, but it's basically a requirement that someone leaves campus, they need to be able to prove they can come back to campus symptom-free or with a negative test.
And I assume it's the typical 14 days after symptoms go away to come back to school?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's all the questions that I see. Whoa, hang on. What about enforcement of mask wearing? Will it be enforced for all to wear their masks covering both their nose and their mouth? And how are you going to do that?
So Sean has a slightly easier job with this, I would have to say, because we're dealing with everything from preschoolers to 12th graders in this one. And so, yeah, we know that the first couple of weeks of school in particular is going to be really about habit forming. And first of all, we also know that, you know, parents are great partners in this. So we're going to be working with them around protocols, what masks, et cetera, that masks are worn the proper way. Those kinds of things would certainly be checked at school, and we'd work with students. But, you know, we look at this very differently than, say, the chewing gum rule or the hat rule. This is a public safety issue. This is a matter of re-ingraining habits and adapting to a new way of doing school, which, you know, quite honestly, kids are pretty adaptable. So, you know, we've already had a few kindergarten play dates, for example, at the elementary school, and these are, you know, 5-year-olds coming to us. They're showing no problem in wearing a mask. And so, you know, we're knowing that this is a key component, and I think we'll be able to certainly support that. And again, we would have a strict policy that if a student simply refuses to wear a mask, they can't really be in school then.
And I'll build on that. That's exactly our policy here, and it's not just for students; it's for staff and faculty. I mean, if you do not feel well, we have a mask at all time, and that's just the deal. And I'll just say we've taken it one step further in that the community college system has put in place a new student social contract that talks about their responsibility to their own health and to others and to their community, whether it's their school or their community outside. So I think that was a big step that's going across the entire state, the entire community college system. We have a student code of conduct anyway, and I think just adds to that the aspect that really everyone has to be responsible, and this is a public health issue. It's not a personal right issue per se. And if we do have, if folks who have some kind of medical condition, we do have a process to go through if they cannot wear a mask, and we're just going to deal with those kind of one at a time as they come up.
So I have a question probably for you, Steve. There are different socialization needs from, you know, kindergarten up through high school. High schoolers are better adaptable to learning remotely, and kindergartners are not. They need that social time. Can you speak a little bit to the different ways that you're bringing different grades back or not back, and the timing on those, please?
Yeah, thanks, Val. So first of all, our task force had recognized early on that remote learning is not really a workable model for kindergartners or first graders for that matter. So we did make the decision to our program for those 2 grade levels would actually be totally in person. But because we can't bring everybody back at the same time, we're running 2 half-day programs at each of those grade levels. So their experience will be totally in school, no remote learning for a half-day program. 2nd through 5th grade, again, there's different needs in terms of elementary, and we certainly want to build those social connections in those grade levels in different ways. So one of the things that I've talked with some of our PTA, PTO representatives is around other ways that we can just organize social interaction with kids. It doesn't have to all be in one place, because again, we're not under a stay-at-home order. We just want to control size of groups, etc. So both in school and out. And then, you know, again, one of the reasons why we are looking to run all of our extracurriculars and in sports within certain restrictions is that we know those are critical elements for social interaction with kids as well. So we may not be playing competitive football against Manchester, but we do know that we can do a lot with football skills, et cetera, in a more controlled, socially distant way. Because we know an element of that is just that team camaraderie and just the social interaction.
Yes, it's such an important part of the educational experience, isn't it? At all levels, certainly at the college level. And I think it's just as important to be social and figure out who you are, because you're recreating yourself at the college level, right? Sort of like the transition you make between elementary school and middle school and then again high school, when you're again recreating yourself and you need that social interaction to figure out what to do there. So it's great to hear that there's some consideration of that.
Yeah, Val, we are engaging our student groups and clubs in a virtual way. We've been, as I say, we made a decision back in May that we're going to be as remote as possible for the fall. So the student life folks here on campus kicked into action and started making those connections and talking with the student groups about how they could stay connected, stay engaged, and keep that going into the fall semester, even though campus is not wide open for them to come and meet.
Thank you, Sean. We know it's we're talking about students, but it's important for adults as well, right? We're all feeling a little distanced, more distanced than we want to be often. So and the children just don't understand it. I know my 5-year-old grandson just doesn't understand why he can't play with his friends. So it's important to all of us, and I appreciate that you're addressing that. That's great. Ben, do we have more questions coming in?
Does not appear to be, not at this time.
All right, so I'll open it up to Steve and Sean if there's anything else that you want to share with us. Any more plugs that you want to give us, Sean? Because I thought that one was fascinating. I might want to look into that one.
Well, I do have one, just a couple things. One is we have a couple of programs that we have restarted that are important to not only the Great Bay, but certainly to our community. One is our medical assistant program. We took a time off from April to August, but we have restarted in a hybrid fashion, and students are responding well to it. So that's one where every time we graduate a class of students, they go right into the medical field. And our second one starts in October, and we're already getting calls of interest both from potential students and from potential employers who want to hire them. So we're very excited to have not lost the momentum of that program. And the second one is Great Bay made an investment over the summer. We built a welding lab in our Rochester campus, and we are opening up with I think it's 30 students. Steve and his team at Portsmouth High bailed us out last year and helped us out. We're hoping to complete 13 students in Portsmouth. We're hoping to complete 14 welders at SST, and then we're starting 30 new ones. So that's, talk about rebuilding the economy, talk about building New Hampshire and employers. It's a high demand position. It's a well-paying position. And the good news is that we made an investment and we're already getting people signing up to come through our classes. So stay tuned. There'll be a lot more on that because it's just something that's in demand. And we were very happy to be able to spend some money and invest in ourselves and invest in our state.
That's fantastic. We all know that the trades we need to get more people into the trades. What is the average age of an electrician? 63 or 64, I think. So yes, we need to get young blood into our trades. So that's fabulous that we're hearing about the pipeline. And Ben and I have been in the shop class at the high school working with the CTE program. Ben and Courtney working, trying to build that workforce. And I was blown away with the way these students were using the tools, and quite frankly, I was quite happy to see a young lady using a power saw to cut up a large piece of plywood. And I thought, oh, go girl. I was very happy with that.
Yeah, and Valerie, on that point, I'd also mention, and again, we have a great partnership with the Chamber, but we are starting the beginnings of a new program in our CTE Center, building on what Sean was just talking about. Our health occupation program will start this fall. One of our new hires will be starting with an intro course that we hope will grow into a 2-year program that would also help satisfy what we see as a huge need for labor in the health ocs field.
Right.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. This is our future workforce, folks. We have a lot of businesses on the call here, and these are the folks that are going to provide the well-trained, well-educated, well-socialized people that you're going to want to hire. So we'll continue to work with Sean and Steve. Thank you both so much for being here. It's always a pleasure talking with you. So maybe we need to schedule you for February now and see where we are.
All right.
And get the update then. So thank you very much. I'm just going to do some wrap-ups here with a little bit more information. Our next chat is on September 11th. You may remember that we've revised our schedule from every Friday to second and fourth Fridays of the month. So September 11th is our next one, and that's Patricia Tilley. She is the Deputy Director for the New Hampshire Division of Public Health Services, Department of Health and Human Services. Testing, contact tracing, and your responsibility as a business if someone on your staff or connected to your staff tests positive. What does that look like? What are our obligations, and what's the process that we need to follow? So join us for that. I want to remind you that we have our annual dinner, Street Life, has been reimagined this year. We are not going to have 500 of our closest friends out on the street having dinner together and partying together. We instead have reimagined it to be Stream Life. So it's going to be virtual. It's still going to be fun. Ben has a brand new remote, it's called Remo, right, Ben? You want to jump in and tell us a little bit about Remo?
Yes, Remo is a virtual event platform where you can still network and hop table to table and connect with your colleagues and friends and peers from around the community. And so we'll be utilizing that and having recognizing some great award recipients. We have 5 awards that we're going to be showcasing this year and some other fun surprises along the way.
We're pretty excited about it. Actually, it's we don't need a tent this year, which is less of a, we don't have to worry about the weather this year. So there's always a silver lining, right? But we're very excited about it. I think we've got a good program planned. It's from 5 to 6:30 on Thursday, September 24th. Doesn't eat into your workday too much and doesn't eat into your dinner time. So I think you'll be able to join us. So watch for more information on that. We also have a golf tournament coming up on October 9th. We're looking for sponsors and players. As you know, the golf courses have been open for a while now, and people are outside and they can space well. So join us for the golf tournament on October 9th. Contact Jen if you have an interest in either sponsoring or setting up a foursome. So I'm going to remind you again. You've heard it a couple of times. Wear a mask. Safe distance, wash your hands. Usually we try to walk away from these events with something fun or happy, something that makes you smile. Today we're going to hear from Kat Edmondson. She actually is going to be performing at the Music Hall Under the Arch on September 17th. And she's going to be singing a song that I saw recently is one of the, I think it's like 10 or 15 happy songs that we're all looking towards, that we're all enjoying hearing, like Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles, that she's going to be singing It's a Wonderful World. So enjoy it and have a fabulous weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks, if not before. Thank you again, Steve and Sean. Thank you all for joining us today. Ben's going to tee that up for us now. Thank you.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white. a blessed day, a dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I see babies cry, and I watch them grow. They'll learn much more I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
It's that giggle at the end that I enjoy. Pretty fun. So again, thank you all for joining us today. Have a super weekend. Be safe out there. Wear a mask. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.